and I'm going to try to set it on time this time. And I think we're up to like part 5, Dave Scott intro. So we're pressing the egg timer again, and we're continuing along the lines of God giving us His words. I had began this way back saying my passion is to helping people hear what God actually says. So many people are turned away of things that, well, says in the Bible somewhere, but it doesn't. Now, some people are using that as an excuse, and they don't want to hear what God has to say. They were like I was until, in my teen years, until my early 20s, where I wanted to sin, and if you wanted to look around and find enough hypocrites to justify not living for God, going to church, etc., however you translate that you can. But the hypocrite thing, it does work, but it doesn't get you into heaven. You can't, I do this little spoofy thing. It possibly offended some. I didn't really want it to offend anyone. I wanted it to provoke thought. But I encourage people to use the hypocrisy card, because it's like getting a gift card, and whether it's a home improvement store, a hardware store, or a clothing store, and might have an expiration date on it. So if you've got a $50 gift card, you want to use it all. Well, the hypocrisy card has an expiration date. When you die, it'll work no more. Now, it'll work very well while on this earth, and you can play the hypocrisy card and keep deflecting the voice of God and not hear Him, and rebel and run away from God, and call your family members who are Christians or your neighbors or whatever, and call them hypocrites. So it'll work. But when you die, it's expired. So this false notion that we have that we're going to be at the pearly gates, and we're going to dicker with God, and we're going to be on the scales, and good deeds and bad deeds and all of those things, it's all people who don't know Christ. They won't be at the pearly gates. That's a concept that we use. If you died right now and God asked you, but God's not going to ask you if you die without Christ. You're not going to go before Him, and you're going to be there, and Peter's going to be standing there at the clipboard, or God. You're going to be away from the presence of God. And then in Revelation 20, it speaks of a great white throne judgment that finalizes your forever separation from God. So my desire is that my passion is that people actually hear what God has to say. Let's not condemn them to hell, and yet we give them such a skewed message. The book I'm working on right now, because I had mentioned it fits with the Jews and they're not being able to believe what they should believe, and because their direction. I'm back to John 5 if you just haven't followed this whole thing around. And then this book, Beyond Pretend, and we'll see if we can get a shot of this. Is kind of a mock-up. I actually have this lulu.com where I can send my manuscript, and I can design my cover, front cover and back cover. And so I had it just to see. I wanted the format like this. This looks like a study book, but I wanted this to look more inviting, that I'm hoping even, someone marginally, or maybe someone doesn't know Christ, can read it and take up the challenge. It's written to people who believe, who pretend there is not a God. It's written to people who pretend there is a God. And then it's written to the rest of us who believe there is a God. But like the man called out, Lord, I believe, help thou. King James would say, version would say, help thou my unbelief. And in this, where am I? What can I, or where am I? Who controls my world? Who really controls my world? And with these Jews, it was each other, because they sought praise with each other. So we have to this is why it's so important to truly worship. Because when you truly worship, and not just a good feeling of wonderful music and a message that motivates, and this thing we talk about getting excited that we drum up ourselves, that we manufacture, but truly being before God and being captured by that and excited by that, if God is the one who's doing it, if the Holy Spirit is the one who's stirring our hearts, And that is when we're able then to see past the horizon of this earth and follow through. Not edit what God is telling us, because it's not going to take us in the direction that we want to go. And that's important, because that's what we do. We have to change. If our heart is not in sync with God, if we're not bowed before God. I did a study once, and we're going to stop. We're going to continue right there on our study. And the Old Testament word for worship is shakah. And I do that funny little thing with my throat, but I'm not a Hebrew scholar, and I'd feel kind of silly doing that, but it will stop.